Good evening. The government's message is still very much work from home if you can, but those who did commute into and around the capital today, there was a change. Rail, tube and bus fares have all gone up. It was meant to kick in back in January, but was delayed because of the pandemic. So today, for the first time in 8 years, rail fares rose higher than inflation. And the Mayor's infamous fare freeze on the tube and bus is very much thawed out. But with a flexible workforce predicted to be the norm when the pandemic is over, do we need more flexible travel tickets? Our political correspondent Simon Harris explains.
Travelling by train during lockdown can be a lonely experience. It's also an expensive one. Most people might be working from home, but commuters without that option faced an above-inflation fare rise today.
We're coming from Kent. I've got no option to pay it.
I think it's going to put a lot of pressure on us. Not all of us, unfortunately, are working from home.
I think it's going to be put enormous pressure on people, by increasing the fares. I don't think so it's fair at this point in time.
Ticket prices went up by around 2.6%. The increase will apply to the rail network and on Transport for London's tubes and buses. The high cost of commuting has always been a necessary evil. It's a price many of us are prepared to pay for a job in London. But coronavirus has changed that. Take just one train company, Govia Thameslink. Before COVID, 1.1 million trips were made on its trains every day. Now it's just 200,000. On the tubes and buses, 10 million daily journeys pre-pandemic are now down to 2.7 million. It shows that huge swathes of London's workforce have become used to staying away. Spending time and money on the daily commute is less appealing than ever. More flexible fares might be one way to encourage people back.
The chance of having a flexible, a part-time season ticket or a book of carnet tickets is going to make the difference to them between potentially, working at home 5 days a week or coming to the office a couple of times a week.
At his falafel shop in the city, Alberto isn't expecting a rush back to work anytime soon.
I don't reckon it'll get anything to, let's say, a year and a half ago until early next year when a majority of the population has been vaccinated. We don't expect to get that much business.
Jonathan's firm sells office space. He has 8 buildings in London with 3,500 desks.
We might see 3 days a week initially before that then returns to what we know as normality.
But you think normality will come back, 5-day-a-week working?
I think it will at some point in the future, yes. I'm optimistic.
Please mind the gap between the train and the platform.
The Department for Transport says it's asked the train companies to come up with a plan for a flexible season ticket to be introduced later this year.
Simon, why have the government done this?
Well, the government's argument for this inflation-busting fare rise is that it's spent billions of pounds propping up the transport system during the pandemic, and the money's got to come from somewhere. Passenger train companies in England have effectively been renationalised at a cost of £10 billion. TfL's had a bailout of £3.3 billion, which partly explains why the Mayor can't go ahead with any further fares freezes. And the only way to make the trains pay is to get commuters back on them in huge numbers. But until everyone's vaccinated, until the pandemic is finally over, we won't know for sure if life as we knew it is coming back or whether working from home is here to stay.
OK, Simon, thank you. Good evening. When the Chancellor delivers his budget tomorrow, London's businesses will be tuning in to see what their future may hold. But for London's culture scene, a share of a nationwide £400 million funding boost was announced today. Music venues, museums and theatres will all be trying to get their share. Over 250,000 jobs rely on the sector, that's according to City Hall. So how many of them could be saved? Our political correspondent Simon Harris reports.
Sonny is an experienced lighting technician, but during lockdown he's been forced to learn a new and unwanted skill: how to lay off colleagues.
I've had to let go of a few team members who are actually really good friends. That was quite a hard hit, especially because I'm quite young as leading this team, so it was the first time I'd ever done anything like that.
Sonny works for White Light, a company based in Wimbledon which specialises in lighting, sound and video for theatres and big corporate events. The managing director is Brian Raven.
We've lost over half our business and we've had to say goodbye to a third of our staff, nearly 100 staff.
Thanks to the Chancellor's latest handout, the company can now apply for a grant of up to £1 million to help it stay afloat. Is it enough?
No, it's not enough. It's very gratefully received, but it's not enough.
What more do you need?
We need the extension of furlough. We need more grants to the businesses to cover things like overheads and rent, because we've had a year of paying full rent on premises as big as this.
More than 250,000 people work in London's creative industries, including TV, theatre and graphic design. They're said to boost the capital's economy by £52 billion. In 2019, London theatres alone made almost £800 million. But in 2020, theatres, like so many creative industries, were shut down.
By giving them the ability to apply for these grants, allows them hopefully to reopen with confidence, and we know they will bounce back very quickly.
Is it enough?
Look, every little helps.
The new fund from the government adds up to more than £400 million. This money amounts to another stopgap. Theatres and indoor venues can't reopen for another 11 weeks at the earliest. Even then, they'll be without their most important financial lifeline, foreign tourists. That's also true for museums. The Florence Nightingale Museum in Waterloo has been mothballed.
International tourists in London are so important. Over 60% of our visitors traditionally come from overseas. That makes a big, big difference to us because Nightingale is truly a global figure. It's very popular, and they're also the people who really like to spend in our gift shop.
In Wimbledon, the company's hoping autumn might bring about a revival in its fortunes. But realistically, it's not expecting anything like business as usual until this time next year. Simon Harris, ITV News, Wimbledon.
Good evening. London's hospitality and retail trade have been hammered by the pandemic, so all eyes are on the Chancellor's budget today for news of a rescue package. Well, Rishi Sunak delivered a raft of measures. Let's take a closer look. New restart grants were announced for businesses who have had to close. £6,000 for non-essential retail and £18,000 for hospitality, leisure and gyms. The business rates holiday was extended until June, and discounted rates will continue until the end of the year. And the 5% reduction on VAT remains in place until October. But for businesses spending tens of thousands of pounds a month on rent in the capital, will this even touch the sides? Our political correspondent Simon Harris reports.
In Danny's menswear shop, there are no customers to serve and no staff to talk to. They're all on furlough. So plenty of time to watch the Chancellor and hear what he had to offer.
This year, we'll continue with the 100% business rates holiday for the first 3 months of the year. In other words, through to the end of June. For the remaining 9 months of the year, business rates will still be discounted by 2/3.
I was hoping that they would discount it completely for another year, but 3 months and then 2/3 is pretty substantial, so I can't really complain on that one.
In her Soho pub, Leslie is worried about her next rent payment, so the offer of a grant to help her reopen should have been good news.
Hospitality and leisure businesses, including personal care and gyms, will open later or be more impacted by restrictions when they do, so we'll give them grants of up to £18,000.
The £18,000 very generous, but it doesn't touch the sides certainly in Soho or probably most of London. It really is not going to help very much towards the rent. I'll pay a month's rent.
Sandy is one of the owners of a gym in St Paul's. He can't reopen for at least another 6 weeks and was hoping for something more.
Last summer we had the Eat Out to Help Out campaign, so the government was imploring people to get back in, to help restaurants, help cafes, get back into it, and yet we got forgotten. This time around it would have been amazing for a Work Out to Help Out scheme or something like it, where the government could have gone, guys, get back into the gym, get back into your health. Nowhere to be seen.
Many of the Chancellor's headline giveaways appear to be part of the government's levelling up agenda. The winners were mainly outside of London.
Offshore wind projects in Teesside and Humberside, the global centre of rail excellence in Neath Port Talbot, a new economic campus in Darlington.
My worry is the government appears to be levelling up by making London poorer. We have suffered the most number of job losses of any region in the country. Our economy has shrunk hugely over the last year. And if the country's going to fire on all cylinders, They need London to be firing all cylinders.
London's shops, restaurants and gyms have felt the full force of the pandemic. The Chancellor said the government's support package for business was now running at more than £400 billion. Simon Harris, ITV News.
The start of the mayor's election campaign took an unexpected turn earlier when protesters descended on the launch in Haringey. In the end, Sadiq Khan was forced to take refuge in a coffee shop. The campaigners were calling for an end to low-traffic neighbourhoods, which they say are causing queues and chaos across the capital. Our political correspondent Simon Harris watched it unfold.
Sequels are rarely an improvement on the original, and Sadiq Khan might be wishing he could rewind to his first campaign launch 12 months ago. That was derailed by COVID. With the election postponed for a year, this was take two. The mayor came to a cafe in Bounds Green to talk about jobs.
The government's got to realise that actually if they want a rapid recovery, as the Chancellor says, they've got to support our city. That means avoiding mass unemployment and helping us create new jobs for tomorrow.
So far, so smooth. But the mayor was in an area of North London where opinion is divided over plans for a low-traffic neighbourhood.
Sadiq, come and talk to us, please. This LTN is causing a lot of displaced pollution and killing people.
At this point, the mayor's visit began to unravel. Around 6 protesters forced him to take refuge in the coffee shop.
Oh, do you want to close this out, do you? Why? No, you can't do that.
That's how political debate works here. That's how it works
but
in
you don't
London.
work in the shop. Why are you closing the door?
They've implemented these LTNs on us without full consultation. We're severely implicated. I've now got to do a mile detour to get to my house.
Just imposing this without consultation it's like a dictatorship.
We just want open engagement, and that's what we're not getting, and we're being failed.
The protest was now clearly causing concern to the mayor's police bodyguards.
Long after he was due to leave, Sadiq Khan is still inside the coffee shop, while his security team apparently decide how best to get him out.
After an hour, the mayor was escorted to a police Range Rover.
Sadiq, please listen to us.
It's supposed to be a democracy.
Sadiq, I would have expected a hybrid at least.
Sadiq Khan's main opponent wasn't surprised by the row over low-traffic neighbourhoods.
And we all know he lost a court case because he tried to take advantage of local people in this pandemic time just by foisting it on them. He should have administered it better, and that's why we're in these troubles.
Later, the mayor laid out his campaign themes on YouTube, where there was no danger of interruption by angry protesters.
Simon, it's not a great start to local election season, was it?
It certainly wasn't the slick photo opportunity politicians are so fond of, but it did highlight the amount of anger that has been generated by low-traffic neighbourhoods. Now, what might concern Sadiq Khan's team is that LTNs have been particularly popular with Labour councils in London, and the worry for his team could be that voters opposed to them in those areas might use the election on May the 6th to register a protest against Labour. Londoners have had to wait an extra year for this election because of COVID, and we found out today that the wait for the result is going to be even longer. Thanks to social distancing, it's going to take 2 days, not one, to count the vote. So we won't actually have the result of the mayoral election until Saturday, May the 8th.
OK, thanks very much, Simon.
Now, a week after the last protesters left the tunnel in Euston, a new HS2 protest camp has popped up in West London. Our political correspondent, Simon Harris, has spent the day there.
In the war of attrition between climate activists and HS2, a new front opened this week. In woods on the edge of Wormwood Scrubs in West London, protesters have set up camp. It's another thorn in the side for those trying to build the £106 billion railway. There are just a handful of tents right now, but it's a community with ambitions to grow. One activist, calling himself crafty, admitted he's only here because he's on furlough from work.
We'll build up and backwards along their fence line.
You'll be up in the trees?
Up in the trees, yeah.
Digging
Behind
tunnels?
you there are mature trees. Can't say anything on the exact plans and logistics and stuff, but yeah, we'll hopefully have some surprises for them.
Teams of security guards have been drafted in to try to stop the protesters frustrating the work of the tree fellers. The activities of those opposing the project is adding millions of pounds to the cost. HS2 has fenced off this part of Wormwood Scrubs so it can begin work on diverting an underground sewer. It's all part of a plan to build a new station not far away at Old Oak Common. HS2 has promised to restore the site and even increase the biodiversity. That doesn't reassure Emma, who walks her dogs here every day and has been a fan of the scrubs for 60 years.
Fundamentally, the landscape will be taken over for 5 years, so the regeneration will take at least 10 of the trees, 20. So we're talking about a 20-year reimbursement for HS2 sewer.
A week ago, HS2 finally evicted the last of a group of activists occupying tunnels beneath Euston Square Gardens in London. But as one camp is demolished, another pops up. 12 miles from Wormwood Scrubs is one of the biggest, in Denham Country Park on the edge of London. When we visited today, most of the tents were deserted. The tree houses were empty. We saw half a dozen activists. The camp was set up more than a year ago to try to stop HS2 building a temporary access road and bridge over the River Colne. The bridge is now finished.
It doesn't feel pointless. Eventually all camps, either we're successful and we leave or they get evicted. We're well aware that a lot of the camps will eventually be evicted, but the whole point is that we're delaying it.
The bill for these delaying tactics now runs at around £50 million and rising. And there's another 10 years of construction work to go. Simon Harris, ITV News, Denham.